Have you ever wondered what happens when someone tries to take over your home? Your sanctuary, your memories? Today, I'm sharing a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. My daughter-in-law walked into our house and with a smug smile declared, "This house is mine now." At first, I thought it was just arrogance, but it quickly became a full-blown battle. Furniture was moved, memories boxed away, and every corner of my home seemed to be claimed without permission. My own son stayed silent, letting it happen. But I had a secret, one document that would change everything. In this story of patience, courage, and family drama, you'll witness how I calmly turned the tables, defended my home, and restored respect in ways no one expected. Stay tuned. You won't believe the moment I finally revealed the truth. You know, people often imagine retirement as a gentle chapter of life. They picture themselves sitting on a porch swing with a cup of hot coffee, watching the sun climb up the sky, listening to birds chatter in the trees, and finally breathing easy after years of hard work. That was exactly what I thought I had earned. My husband and I spent our youth chasing bills and juggling responsibilities, but through it all we had one dream, to buy a house that would one day be our family's anchor. We made that dream happen brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. After he passed, this house became more than just walls and floors to me. It became my sanctuary, my memory box, the one place where his laughter still echoed faintly if I closed my eyes. Every morning for years I followed the same routine. I'd get up, make myself a modest breakfast, and sit by the kitchen window with my coffee. I loved watching the world outside slowly wake up. Neighbors leaving for work, the mailman making his rounds, kids waiting for the school bus. My days were simple. A little gardening, some reading, church on Sundays, and the occasional visit from family. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And honestly, I thought this peace would last. I thought I had seen the hardest storms already. But life has a way of surprising you. Sometimes the storm comes not from the outside world but from inside your very home. That evening started like any other. I had just finished folding some laundry in the living room. The television hummed quietly in the background, playing some news I wasn't paying much attention to. My son had gone out earlier, and I assumed he'd come back in a decent mood. I was even thinking about baking a pie later in the week, something he always loved when he was younger. But then I heard the front door slam. Hard. It startled me. I actually dropped the towel I was folding. I looked up and there she was. My daughter-in-law. She stood in the doorway like she owned the place, her arms crossed, her chin lifted high. There was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Something sharp, cold, and determined. My son stood just a few steps behind her, but his entire posture screamed avoidance. Head down, shoulders slumped, hands shoved in his pockets. "What's going on?" I asked carefully, setting the rest of the laundry aside. She didn't waste a single second. She marched into the room, planted herself right in front of me, and said the words that would change everything. "This house is mine now." First I thought I misheard. Maybe she was joking. Or maybe she was talking about something else entirely. My ears rang and for a brief second it felt like time froze. I blinked at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say she was kidding. But there was no humor in her expression. Only entitlement. I looked at my son, hoping he'd step in, explain what she meant. Maybe even scold her for being so rude. But he didn't. He didn't say a single word. He just stood there, eyes glued to the floor. That silence hurt worse than her words. I felt the weight of the room pressing down on me. My living room, filled with family photos and old furniture my husband built, suddenly felt foreign. Like I was no longer welcome there. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment I thought I might faint. But instead I took a deep breath. I straightened my back. I refused to let her see me break. "Excuse me," I finally said, my voice calm but firm. She smirked, tilting her head slightly as if I were a child who didn't understand something obvious. "You heard me. This house, it belongs to us now. To me and your son. You've had your time here, and now it's ours." Her words cut through me like glass. My time here? As if I were some temporary guest. As if my decades of sacrifice meant nothing. I glanced at my son again, silently begging him to speak, but all I got was that awful silence. In that moment I felt two things at once. Heartbreak and fire. Heartbreak because this was my son, my boy, the child I raised with everything I had. And fire because no one, not even the woman he married, was going to erase me from my own home. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. Instead, I did what I've always done in the hardest moments of my life. I stayed calm. I folded my hands neatly in my lap, looked her in the eye and said softly, "We'll see about that." But deep inside my mind was racing. Memories of sleepless nights working double shifts to pay the mortgage flashed before me. The image of my husband holding our son in this very living room played in my head. And I remembered something else too, something they didn't know. Something that would change everything. That night as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the house I knew so well. I thought about her words over and over again like a cruel echo. This house is mine now. And I realized I needed to be ready. She wasn't bluffing. She was preparing to take what I had built with my own hands. But what she didn't realize was that I was prepared too. I wasn't as powerless as she thought. And the day would come soon when I would show her. To understand why her words cut so deep, you have to know what this house means to me. It's not just a building with walls and windows. It's my life story carved into every creak of the floorboards, every dent in the staircase railing, every picture frame hanging crooked on the walls. When my husband and I first bought it, we were barely scraping by. He worked long shifts at the factory, and I was teaching schoolchildren their ABCs during the day, grading papers late into the night. We were young, broke, and full of dreams. That first winter, the furnace barely worked, and we had to huddle under blankets in the living room to stay warm. But even in those hard times I felt proud. We weren't renting someone else's space. We were building our own home. I remember the day we signed the mortgage papers. My husband squeezed my hand so tightly, smiling from ear to ear. "One day," he told me, "this place will be where our son grows up, where he'll always feel safe." He didn't live long enough to see our son grow into the man he is now, but this house, that was his legacy. After he passed suddenly from a heart attack, I felt like my whole world collapsed. The grief was unbearable, but even in my darkest nights, I clung to one promise. I would not lose this home. Not for me. Not for our son. Not for the memory of the man I loved. It wasn't easy. The bills piled up fast, and the paychecks never stretched far enough. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, wondering how I was going to make the next mortgage payment. But somehow I always found a way. I took on extra tutoring jobs, gave piano lessons to neighborhood kids, even sewed clothes for people around town to earn a few extra dollars. There were nights when I'd come home so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open, but I'd still walk around the house, touching the walls, whispering to myself, "It's worth it. It's all worth it." And when my son was little, I never let him see how hard it was. He thought I was made of steel, that I never bent or broke. Maybe in a way I was. Every corner of this house holds a memory. The porch where I sat with my husband on summer evenings drinking sweet tea, planning a future we thought would be endless. The kitchen where my little boy once tugged at my apron strings, asking for cookies before dinner. The hallway where his first crayon drawings are still faintly visible, no matter how many times I tried to scrub them off. Even the oak tree in the backyard, it was just a sapling when my husband planted it, and now it towers tall like a guardian watching over us. So when she stood in my living room and declared it was hers, it wasn't just an insult. It was like spitting on my husband's memory. It was like erasing every sacrifice I had ever made. It was telling me my life's work counted for nothing. And yet that's not all. Because what my daughter-in-law didn't know, what even my son didn't know, was that I had already thought about this possibility years ago. See, when my husband passed, I went to a lawyer. I was scared back then. Scared someone might trick me, or that one day circumstances would force me out of the house we had built. The lawyer was kind and patient. He explained to me that there were ways to secure the home, ways to make sure that no matter what happened, it would remain mine until the day I died. I didn't tell a soul, not even my sisters or closest friends. I didn't want anyone to think I was paranoid. But in the back of my mind, I always knew life has a way of testing you. People, even family, can surprise you. I tucked that truth away like a secret weapon, and life went on. My son grew up, went off to college, started a career. I was proud of him. I thought maybe the hardest days were behind me. I thought the house was finally safe. But then came the day he told me he was getting married. I was thrilled for him. Every mother dreams of seeing her child find love, build a family, live happily. And when I met her, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, I'll admit I let myself hope. She was bright, confident, polished in a way that made me feel clumsy in my old sweaters and sensible shoes. But she was sweet to me at first. She complimented my cooking, helped me tidy up, even sat with me on the porch and asked about my younger years. For the first time in decades I thought maybe I won't be so alone after all. Maybe she'll be like the daughter I never had. But little cracks started to show. Comments here and there, harmless at first. "Oh, the house has such an old-fashioned charm," she'd say with a polite smile. Or, "Have you ever thought about knocking down this wall to open things up? It'd look more modern." At first I brushed it off as excitement. Every young couple wants to make their mark. But soon the comments turned sharper. "This wallpaper is hideous. It really drags down the value of the place." Or, "Honestly, this kitchen is way too outdated. If this were my house, I'd remodel it top to bottom." Those words lingered. If this were my house. She said it often. Too often. And maybe I should have seen it coming sooner, but I didn't. Because I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe she cared about me, about family, about respect. But the truth was she cared about one thing, control. So when she finally looked me dead in the eye and said, "This house is mine now," it wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was a declaration. A promise that she was going to try to take everything I had fought for. But here's the thing. She didn't know who she was dealing with. I may be older. I may move slower. I may not argue or shout. But I am not weak. And while she thought she was playing a clever game, I had been preparing my entire life for moments just like this. When my son first told me about her, I remember the light in his eyes. He called me late one night, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, I met someone," he said, and I could hear that little boy tone in his voice, the same one he used when he was 10 years old and came home to tell me he hit his first baseball. That kind of joy is contagious, and as a mother, all you want is to see your child happy. So when he brought her over for dinner the first time, I went out of my way to make everything perfect. I cooked his favorite roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and that chocolate pie he always asked for on his birthday. I even brought out the fine china that had been sitting in the cabinet for years, untouched since my husband's passing. When she walked in, I thought she was stunning. Dressed smartly, her hair shining, her smile bright and practiced. She greeted me warmly, even hugged me. And for a moment I thought maybe God has sent me the daughter I never had. She complimented the house right away, telling me how charming it was, how it reminded her of simpler times. I took it as a compliment, though looking back, maybe it was the first of many backhanded remarks. Still, that night as we sat at the table, the three of us laughing, I felt hope. I imagined her helping me in the kitchen, the two of us gossiping about recipes or TV shows, maybe even her confiding in me like a daughter would. I pictured future holidays with grandkids running through the hallways, the house filled with laughter again. The wedding came quickly after. It was a small ceremony at a local church, and though it wasn't extravagant, it was beautiful. I wore a pale blue dress and cried quietly as I watched my son say his vows. My husband should have been there. I felt the ache of his absence so sharply that day, but I told myself he was smiling down from heaven. When they moved in with me after the wedding, I didn't complain. I had space, and I told myself it would be good to have company. The house had grown too quiet, and in a way, I thought their presence would fill it again. First, it felt like a blessing. She joined me in the kitchen, asking about my recipes, scribbling them down as if she wanted to learn. She'd sit with me on the porch, sipping sweet tea, asking about my childhood. Sometimes she even called me Mom. And I'll admit, it melted my heart. But slowly, things began to shift. Started with little comments. She'd look around and say, "This wallpaper is interesting. Kind of outdated, don't you think?" Or she'd laugh lightly and say, "I can't wait until we give this place a modern touch." I told myself it was harmless, just youthful ideas. After all, every generation wants to change things, to put their stamp on the world. But the comments grew bolder. "This kitchen is really small. When this is my house, I'm going to knock down that wall." She said it so casually, like it was already decided. The first time I heard it, I laughed nervously and replied, "Well, let's hope I'm still cooking in here for a good long while." She smiled, but there was something in her eyes, something that didn't look like a joke. Soon I noticed how she moved through the house. She didn't ask before rearranging the furniture. One day I came home from church to find the living room turned upside down, the couch against a different wall, My husband's old armchair shoved into the corner like an afterthought. "It looks more open this way," she said with a shrug, as if she'd done me a favor. I began to feel like a guest in my own home. Worse still was the way my son acted. My boy, who had always been quick to defend me, to stand up for what was right, suddenly seemed quiet, passive. When she made remarks about the house or pushed my things aside, he stayed silent. He avoided my eyes, fidgeted with his hands, or mumbled something under his breath. At night, I lay awake wondering, was he afraid of her? Did he agree with her? Or worse, did he care so little for me now that he didn't see how much it hurt? The turning point came one evening after dinner. I had cooked a simple meal, chicken casserole and a salad, and as I was clearing the dishes, she leaned back in her chair and said with a smirk, "You know, older people shouldn't cling to things. Sometimes it's better to let the younger generation take over." Her words hung in the air like poison. My fork clattered against the plate in my hand. I looked at her, my heart pounding, and for the first time, I saw her not as my daughter-in-law, not as family, but as a stranger sitting in my house, making plans for a life that wasn't hers to claim. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell her everything I had sacrificed to keep this house. How many nights I cried myself to sleep but still managed to fight for it. But instead I stayed calm. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked to the sink and said quietly, "This house is not just a building. It's my life." She rolled her eyes and laughed softly like I was being dramatic. My son stayed silent. Again. That silence stung deeper than anything she could have said. It was then I realized something important. She wasn't just dropping hints. She was making a plan. Slowly, carefully, she was positioning herself, convincing my son, maybe even convincing herself that this house was hers. And I also realized something else. If I wasn't careful, if I didn't stay one step ahead, she just might succeed. That night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise to myself. I would not let her take from me what I had bled for, cried for, worked for. She could make her little comments, she could play her little games, but she didn't know me. She didn't know the strength that had carried me through storms bigger than her. And she definitely didn't know about the document I kept locked away, tucked safely out of sight, waiting for the day I might need it. Because whether she liked it or not, this house was mine. The little comments and subtle digs were only the beginning. What started as whispers soon became storms, and before long, my daughter-in-law's presence in the house felt less like a guest and more like an intruder planting her flag in foreign land. It was in the small everyday moments that I first felt the shift. I'd come downstairs in the morning to find furniture moved around again. The old rocking chair my husband built for me, his proudest woodworking project, was suddenly shoved into the garage. "It doesn't match the vibe," she said with a dismissive shrug when I asked about it. The vibe? That chair had rocked my son to sleep when he was a baby. It had rocked me through nights of grief after my husband passed. And now it was exiled to a dusty corner because it didn't fit her idea of aesthetic. My framed wedding photo, which had hung above the mantel for decades, was quietly replaced by a trendy abstract painting. When I asked where my photo went, she waved her hand casually. "Oh, I put it away. We don't want the place to feel too dated." Dated? That was my husband's face, the man who had built this home with me. And she had the audacity to box him up like some old decoration that didn't belong anymore. First, I tried to resist gently. I'd move the chair back, rehang the photo, put the curtains I liked back on the windows. But the very next day, I'd find them gone again. And every time my son stood by silently. When I asked him about it, he just muttered, "She just wants to feel at home too, Mom." At home. The word stabbed. This was my home. She had been here for months, and already she wanted to erase the life that had been built here for decades. But the disrespect didn't stop there. It spread into the way she spoke to me. Once I overheard her on the phone with a friend laughing. "This old house is such a project. I swear once it's mine, I'm gutting the whole place." The word stung, but even more than that, it was the way she said once it's mine, like it was an inevitability, like I was already gone. And then came the dinners. I've always believed in eating together as a family. Growing up, no matter how tired I was from teaching, I made sure my son had a home-cooked meal. But now, sitting at my own dinner table, I felt like a stranger. She'd dominate the conversation, ignoring me unless it was to make a snide remark. If I offered to help with something, she'd roll her eyes and say, No offense, but you're set in your old ways. You wouldn't understand modern cooking. My son would chuckle nervously, pretending it was a joke. But it wasn't a joke. Every word was a small push, a small shove trying to move me out of the picture. The hardest part wasn't her disrespect. It was my son's silence. The boy I had raised, the one who used to stand up to bullies in school, now sat quietly while his wife chipped away at my dignity. I would look at him across the table, my eyes begging him to say something, anything. But he never did. And that silence carved deeper wounds than her words ever could. One evening things reached a boiling point. I had just finished baking a pie, my husband's favorite, apple with a buttery crust. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and sweet. I placed it on the counter to cool, proud of the tradition I'd kept alive. She walked in, wrinkled her nose as if I'd left garbage out. Why do you always make such a mess in here? When this is my house, I'm knocking down this entire kitchen. My hands froze on the pie tin. My house. My kitchen. What did you just say? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, smirking. I said, when this is my house, I'm going to remodel everything. Open floor plan, new appliances. This old place needs an upgrade. I stared at her, my heart pounding. This is my house, I said firmly. She laughed like I was a silly child. For now. I turned to my son standing in the doorway, watching, waiting, hoping. Are you going to say something? I asked him, my voice cracking. He shifted uncomfortably, rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, let's not fight. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. My throat tightened. To him maybe it wasn't. But to me it was everything. This wasn't just about walls and floors. This was about respect, about love, about family. And for the first time I realized I wasn't just fighting her. I was fighting the silence of the very child I had raised. That night I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. My heart ached in a way I can't fully explain. I felt betrayed, not just by her cruelty, but by his passivity. But even as tears slid down my cheeks, another feeling stirred inside me, determination. I had weathered worse storms than this. I had buried a husband, raised a child alone, worked until my hands were blistered to keep this house. And I wasn't about to roll over and hand it away. She thought she was clever. She thought she had the upper hand. But she had no idea what strength I had left. She had no idea that one piece of paper, locked safely away, held more power than all her smug words combined. And one day soon I'd show it to her. The air in the house grew thicker with every passing week. I felt like a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around so as not to ignite her temper. But no matter how quiet I tried to be, no matter how much I yielded, it was never enough for her. She had started taking liberties, bigger ones now. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of hammers and drills. My heart nearly stopped as I came downstairs and found two men in the living room, rolling up my carpet and stacking it by the door. What on earth is going on here? I shouted, startling them. Before they could answer, she appeared, her arms crossed, that same smirk plastered on her face. Oh, don't panic. I hired them to take out this ugly old carpet. It's disgusting and outdated. We'll replace it with hardwood. My voice shook, though I tried to steady it. You had no right to do this. This is my house. Her tone was light, mocking. Relax, Mom. Soon enough it'll be ours anyway. Might as well start early. The workers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. I snapped. Stop immediately. Get out of my house. The men glanced at her, waiting for her instruction. She rolled her eyes but finally waved them off. They packed up their tools and left, though not without muttering about wasted time. I turned to my son, who had wandered in halfway through the commotion. Did you know about this? I asked, tears of fury stinging my eyes. He wouldn't look at me. She just wanted to help make the place nicer. Maybe you should have. Nicer. I cut him off. This house is already filled with more love and memories than she'll ever understand. How dare you both treat it like some empty shell to strip bare? My son sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the problem. Mom, please don't make this a fight. We all live here now. We should share decisions. Share decisions. Those words felt like poison. Share decisions meant I was being demoted from owner to roommate in my own sanctuary. Later that week, the situation worsened. We had a family dinner. My niece and her kids came over, along with a couple of neighbors who had been friends with me for decades. It should have been a warm, cheerful evening. But instead, it became the night my daughter-in-law crossed the line completely. We were halfway through dinner when she cleared her throat dramatically. "I just want to make an announcement," she said, clinking her glass. Everyone turned toward her. My gut twisted. I knew something cruel was coming. She smiled sweetly, her arm looping through my son's. "As you all know, John and I have been living here for a while now. And well, we've decided it's time to really make this place ours. This house is going to be mine one day. And when it is, I can't wait to transform it into something modern and beautiful." The table fell silent. My niece blinked in shock. One of my neighbors, old Mr. Thompson, looked at me with pity in his eyes. I felt heat rise in my chest, my hands trembling under the table. I managed to find my voice, though it was quiet. "This is my house." She gave a little laugh like I had told a silly joke. "For now, yes. But let's be honest, you're not getting any younger. Eventually, it'll pass to John, and since I'm his wife, well..." She lifted her glass in a mock toast. "Here's to the future." The humiliation seared into me like fire. She had stripped me of dignity in front of my family and neighbors, reducing me to some placeholder tenant in the very home I had built. Everyone at the table shifted awkwardly. My niece muttered, "That's not right," but she was drowned out by my son's weak chuckle as he tried to smooth things over. "She's just joking, Mom. Don't take it so seriously." But I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't joking. Not one bit. I sat through the rest of dinner in silence, my food turning to ash in my mouth. Inside, though, something shifted. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was resolve. I tolerated her digs, her redecorating, her arrogance. I'd forgiven my son's silence, his weakness. But now she had crossed into outright theft of respect. She had declared war in front of witnesses. And she thought she had already won. When everyone left that night and the house was quiet again, I went upstairs to my room. I opened the drawer of my old cedar chest, the one with my most precious keepsakes, my husband's letters, baby pictures of my son, the deed papers wrapped carefully in a protective sleeve. I ran my fingers over the envelope. The weight of it felt reassuring, solid. She didn't know. She had no idea what this house meant, or how carefully I had guarded it. This wasn't just a home. This was my fortress. My husband and I had built it brick by brick, mortgage by mortgage, sweat by sweat. And years ago, after his passing, I had promised myself no one, not even my own blood, would take it from me. I sat there in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, clutching that envelope, and for the first time in weeks I smiled. Let her think she had already claimed it. Let her strut through the halls like a queen. When the time was right, I would open this envelope, and with one calm motion, her empire of arrogance would crumble into dust. She had made her claim. But I had the truth. And the truth was stronger than her entitlement. After that dinner, something inside me hardened. She thought she'd humiliated me. Thought she'd stolen my dignity in front of family and neighbors. But she hadn't broken me. If anything, her arrogance only sharpened my resolve. Still, her behavior grew bolder. She had crossed the threshold of disrespect, and now she was determined to push me all the way out. The very next morning, I came downstairs to find my photo albums stacked in boxes near the front door. Decades of memories, vacations, birthdays, my son's first day of school. Packed away like clutter. I froze, my heart hammering. "What's this?" I asked, my voice cold. She breezed into the room, sipping coffee from a mug she'd bought just last week, the one that said Boss Lady in bold letters. "Oh, those? I'm making space in the living room. We don't need all this old junk lying around. It's depressing." "Old junk," I repeated, my jaw tightening. "These are my family's memories." She shrugged, not even looking at me. "They're boxed up safely. You can keep them in the attic, or better yet, maybe you should think about donating them. We need to declutter if we're going to redesign this place." I stood there, staring at her, my fingers twitching with the urge to snatch those boxes back into my arms. "You don't get to decide what stays and what goes in this house," I said firmly. Finally, she turned to me, that smug little smirk tugging at her lips. "Oh, come on. You've had your time here. Don't be selfish. Think of the future. Think of us. This is going to be our home." I felt my chest tighten, anger rising like fire. "This is my home. Don't forget that." But she just gave a little laugh and walked away, her heels clicking against the hardwood as though punctuating her victory. Later that week, the violations continued. My favorite armchair, the one where I read every night, suddenly disappeared. When I asked about it, she claimed she'd given it away on Facebook Marketplace. Given it away. My chair gone without my permission. This is theft. I told her, my voice trembling with rage. It's called upgrading, she replied smoothly. You should be thanking me for making this house livable. Honestly, you should be resting at this stage of life, not fussing about old furniture. We're doing you a favor. The gall. The audacity. My son, standing nearby, rubbed his forehead and muttered, Please, both of you, just calm down. But I couldn't calm down. Not anymore. This wasn't just redecorating. This was erasure. Piece by piece, she was stripping me of everything I held dear. That night, as I sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea, I remembered my husband's voice from years ago. This house will always be your safe place. Guard it no matter what. He had said those words after we made our final mortgage payment. Back then it felt like a triumph. Now it felt like a prophecy. The days that followed only confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't stopping until she claimed it all. She began inviting her friends over without asking me, parading them through the house as though she were giving a grand tour. I overheard her saying things like, When I redo this bathroom, it'll look like something out of a magazine, and, oh, don't worry, once this house is officially mine, I'll host weekly gatherings here. Her friends laughed, nodding, impressed by her confidence. None of them looked at me. To them, I was invisible, just an old woman taking up space in someone else's future dream home. One evening, I came back from visiting my church group to find that she'd changed the locks on the front door. Changed the locks. When my key didn't fit, my hand shook so badly I nearly dropped my purse. I knocked furious. She opened the door with a sweet, fake smile. Oh, don't worry, I'll get you a copy of the new key. We just thought it was time to upgrade the security. Can't be too careful these days. But I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of victory, the satisfaction of knowing she'd left me standing outside my own house like a stranger. That night, I sat in my room and stared at the envelope again. My fingers itched to take it downstairs, slap it onto the kitchen table, and end this charade once and for all. But something held me back. Timing. The right moment hadn't come yet. She needed to show the world her true face before I revealed mine. And that moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Sunday afternoon when she gathered our extended family and some neighbors again. This time she didn't even wait for dinner. Standing tall in the living room, she announced, Well, I think it's time everyone knows. This house is going to be mine. I already have plans to gut the place, knock down some walls, maybe even add a deck. You'll all love it when you see the changes. Gasps rippled through the room. Eyes turned toward me, searching my face for a reaction. My son looked pale but didn't speak. I sat quietly in my chair, hands folded, heart calm for the first time in weeks. Let her talk. Let her dig her own grave. Because very soon she would learn the truth. The living room was full that Sunday. Family members squeezed onto the couch, neighbors perched on dining chairs we'd pulled in, kids running around with sticky fingers from the pie I'd baked earlier. The chatter was light at first, but I could feel the tension humming beneath it all, like a storm waiting to break. And then, right on cue, my daughter-in-law rose from her seat. She didn't just stand, she performed. She cleared her throat loudly, tapping her glass with a spoon as though she were the hostess of some grand gala. All eyes turned toward her. Well, she began with that honeyed smile that always masked the venom beneath. I just want to thank everyone for coming today. John and I are so excited about our future, and we've been making some big plans. I sat very still in my chair, hands folded neatly in my lap. My chest was tight but my face stayed calm. She went on, her voice brimming with confidence. As most of you know, we've been living here for a while. And honestly, this house has started to feel like ours. In fact, we've already talked about renovations. Once this house is officially mine, I'll be tearing out that awful old carpet, putting in new floors, upgrading the kitchen. You'll all be amazed. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. My niece's fork clattered against her plate. Old Mrs. Carmichael from next door gave me a sharp glance, her eyes narrowing. I could feel everyone waiting for me to speak, to object, to defend myself. But I didn't move. I wanted her to dig her hole a little deeper. She wasn't done yet. No, she wanted spectacle. She wanted to humiliate me publicly. And let's be honest, she said, turning toward me now, her eyes glinting. It's only natural. Mom here has had a good run, but she can't take care of a place like this forever. It's time for the next generation to step in. Time for me to make this house a proper home. The words stung, but not because they were true, they weren't. They stung because of the arrogance with which she spoke, as if she were already queen of the castle. I saw my son sitting beside her, his face pale. He shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. But once again he said nothing. Isn't that right, John? She nudged him. He stammered. But before he could finish she raised her glass high. To the future of this home, she declared. My home. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me. The humiliation hung in the air like smoke. My pulse pounded in my ears, but outwardly I was calm. I smiled faintly, my lips barely moving. Well, I said softly, isn't that something? She tilted her head, a little smirk tugging at her mouth. She thought she had one. But in that silence, in that heavy pause, something shifted. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one who looked small. She did. Her arrogance was on full display, laid bare for everyone to see. The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. My niece whispered something to her husband, who frowned. Even the children grew quiet, sensing the sharpness in the room. I let the silence stretch, savoring it. Then I leaned back in my chair and said in a voice cool as steel, You've made your position very clear. Her smile faltered just a fraction, confused by my calmness. I didn't say more. Not yet. Timing was everything. After the gathering ended and the guests began trickling out, several lingered to whisper words of support. Mrs. Carmichael patted my shoulder, murmuring, Don't let her push you out, dear. That house has always been yours. My niece hugged me tightly, her eyes full of concern. Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law strutted about like she'd just hosted a successful event, completely oblivious to the discomfort she'd sown. But I noticed my son's eyes. He wouldn't meet mine. Guilt clung to him like a shadow. He knew she had gone too far. And maybe deep down he feared what was coming next. That night, when the house was quiet again, I sat at my desk in my bedroom and pulled out the envelope once more. I ran my fingers along the crisp edge, my heart steady now. The time was near. She believed she had already claimed my home, already written me out of the picture. But what she didn't know was that years ago, after losing my husband, I had made a vow. No one would ever take this house from me. I had sat in a lawyer's office, signed documents with trembling hands, and locked away the deed with protections that could not be undone. It was all here in this envelope. I set it on the desk in front of me and smiled. Let her keep crowing, keep redecorating, keep pretending she owned what she didn't. Because soon, very soon, I would calmly place this document on the table. And in that moment, her arrogance would shatter. She thought this was a battle of words. She thought silence meant defeat. But I had been waiting. And when I revealed the truth, she would never forget it. When you've lived long enough, you learn the value of preparation. Life has a way of teaching you to plan for storms, even on the sunniest of days. My husband used to say, hope for the best, but protect yourself against the worst. Those words echoed in my ears the night I sat at my desk, staring at the envelope that held the key to everything. The truth is, I'd been preparing for this moment long before my daughter-in-law ever stepped foot in this house. It started after my husband died. I was 52 years old then, and the grief felt like a heavy stone pressing down on my chest. For weeks I wandered the house like a ghost, barely able to function. But once the fog lifted, I realized I had a son to raise, bills to pay, and a future to secure. I went to a lawyer not long after the funeral. I remember sitting across from him, clutching my purse with trembling hands, telling him, I need to make sure no one ever takes this house away from me. He nodded, understanding. Mrs. Harris, we can set up protections, put everything in your name, update the deed, create a trust if you'd like. That way, you'll never have to worry. We spent hours going over papers, signatures, legal terms I barely understood at the time. But I knew one thing for certain. This house, the one my husband and I had worked ourselves to the bone for, would remain mine for as long as I lived. I signed documents, notarized forms, and walked out of that office with a sense of relief. For the first time since my husband's passing, I felt safe again. Over the years, I updated those papers carefully. When my son turned 18, I made sure he was aware, though vaguely, that the house was secured. Not in a way that would discourage him, but in a way that reminded him this home was not something to be gambled with. He never argued. In fact, he seemed comforted by it at the time. I didn't realize then how crucial those steps would be. Back then, I was just a widow trying to hold on to what little security I had left. But as the years passed and my son grew into a man, I kept everything updated: wills, deeds, trusts, making sure every I was dotted and every T crossed. I wasn't naive. I knew people could change. I knew money and property had a way of bringing out the worst in family. So when my daughter-in-law arrived, with her polished smile and hungry eyes, something deep inside me stirred. I recognized that hunger. I'd seen it before in distant relatives who sniffed around after my husband's death, curious about what I might inherit. I had smiled politely then, but I'd made notes. I had remembered. And now, all these years later, my preparation was about to pay off. I opened the envelope that night, smoothing the crisp papers on my desk. There it was, in black and white: the deed, the trust, the will. My name stood boldly across every page. Legal proof that no one, not even my son, could take this house from me while I lived. And when my time did come, the trust ensured that it would pass fairly, on my terms, not dictated by greed or entitlement. I sat back in my chair, the paper glowing in the lamplight. I thought about my husband. I could almost hear his voice saying, "You did good, Margaret. You protected what we built." A tear slipped down my cheek, but it wasn't from sorrow. It was from pride. I thought about my son, too. I remembered the boy he once was, the one who used to bring me wildflowers from the yard, who used to curl up on the couch beside me and promise, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll always take care of you." Somewhere along the way, that boy had gone quiet, swallowed by the influence of his wife. But I believed he was still in there. Maybe when all this was over, he would remember who he really was. The next morning, I carefully tucked the envelope back into the cedar chest. Not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted the reveal to be deliberate, undeniable. My daughter-in-law loved spectacles, loved to make a scene. Very well, I thought. I'll give her one. In the days that followed, I noticed her arrogance grow even more. She walked around the house like she already had the keys to the kingdom. She talked loudly on the phone about my upcoming renovations. She ordered catalogs for furniture and appliances, stacking them on the coffee table for everyone to see. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I cooked my meals, tended my garden, and kept to my routines. But inside I was steel. She mistook my silence for surrender, but really it was strategy. One evening I overheard her telling a friend, "Honestly, I think she's losing it. She doesn't fight me anymore. She's probably finally realizing she doesn't have much time left here." I smiled to myself as I folded laundry. She had no idea how wrong she was. That Friday my niece stopped by unexpectedly. She'd always been close to me, more like a daughter than a niece. She sat at the kitchen table, her brow furrowed. "Aunt Margaret, what's going on here? Everyone heard what she said last weekend. Are you really going to let her treat you this way?" I sipped my tea calmly. "No, sweetheart. I'm not." "Then why don't you say something?" she pressed. "Because sometimes," I said with a small smile, "the best way to win is to let the other person believe they've already won. It makes the truth that much stronger when it finally comes out." Her eyes widened as if she understood, at least partly. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I trust you. But please don't let her take advantage of you." I patted her hand gently. "Don't worry. I've been preparing for this moment for years." When she left, I went upstairs and looked at the cedar chest again. I touched the lid, feeling the weight of the years, the sacrifices, the love that had gone into this home. And I whispered aloud, "It's almost time." Because the stage was set. My daughter-in-law was drunk on her own arrogance, convinced she had already claimed what was never hers. And when I finally pulled out that document, when I calmly laid it before her and everyone else, she would learn a lesson she would never forget. And so would my son. The day finally arrived, the one I had been preparing for, the one I had imagined countless times while sitting quietly in the kitchen or folding laundry, while listening to her strut around the house like she already owned it. I knew the timing had to be perfect. She had to be at her most arrogant, believing victory was inevitable. And that morning I had planned a small family gathering. Not a dinner, not a party, just a casual Sunday lunch with my son, her, a few neighbors, and my niece and her children. I wanted witnesses, not an audience. I wanted people who would understand the gravity of what was about to unfold. The table was set, the sunlight spilling through the windows, highlighting the neat linens and freshly polished silverware. She arrived early, of course, eager to assert herself. She wore a bright dress, one she no doubt picked to draw attention, and she carried herself with that infuriating confidence, smiling at everyone as though she had already won the battle for my home. She immediately began commenting on everything. "This tablecloth is so old-fashioned," she said, plucking at the edges as though testing its strength. "We should probably replace it with something lighter, more modern." My son shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at me, and I just smiled politely, letting the words roll off me like water. Lunch began with polite conversation, but she kept steering the talk back to her plans for the house. How she wanted to repaint the walls, replace the furniture, redesign the kitchen. Every word dripped with entitlement. She laughed and told everyone, "I can't wait until this house is officially mine. Then the real transformation begins." I set down my fork, taking a deep breath. The moment had come. I stood, clearing my throat to draw attention. The room quieted immediately. Her smirk faltered slightly, sensing that I was about to do something unexpected. "I hear you've been making plans," I said calmly, my voice steady, cutting through the chatter. "About this house." Her smile returned, a little tighter now. "Yes, isn't it exciting? I've been thinking about all the ways I can modernize the place once it's ours." "Yours," I repeated softly, letting the word hang in the air. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Well, eventually. I mean, John and I." I held up a hand and didn't let her finish. "This house is mine. And I have a document that proves it." The envelope on the desk upstairs, so carefully tucked away for years, was now in my hand. I held it calmly, deliberately, as though it were nothing more than a piece of paper. But everyone in the room, neighbors, family, even my son, could sense the tension, the gravity of the moment. I walked to the center of the room, laying the envelope on the table. I opened it slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the deed, the trust documents, and the notarized will. My hands were steady, my voice was calm. "Everything you think you know about this house is wrong. I own it. And legally I always have. This house was secured in my name years ago, after my husband passed. Nothing can change that while I am alive." The room went silent. My daughter-in-law's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes widened, and I saw the first flicker of panic in them. She looked at my son as if expecting him to defend her, but he stayed silent, his face pale. I continued, each word deliberate. "I worked for decades to protect this home. I raised John here, alone after my husband passed. I paid every mortgage, tended every corner of this house. And I did it all because this place holds the memories and love of a lifetime. No one, not even family, can take that away." Her face flushed crimson. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then looked around at the other guests. The neighbors' expressions were unreadable at first, but then some of them nodded slightly as if saying, "We knew it all along." My niece, sitting across the table, whispered, "She can't argue with that, Aunt Margaret. She really can't." The document rested on the table between us. I reached over and tapped it gently. "This is the law. Not opinion, not wishful thinking. Legally, morally, and ethically, this house belongs to me. And anyone who tries to claim otherwise is simply wrong." My daughter-in-law finally found her voice, but it was shaky, desperate. I didn't know. I thought." "You thought?" I echoed, my tone calm but cutting. "You assumed because you were married to my son, you could erase decades of my life? You assumed because you were younger you could simply claim what isn't yours? That was your mistake." She looked around, realizing the room was against her. The neighbors avoided her gaze, and even my son now seemed unsure, guilt written clearly across his face. I leaned back slightly, letting my words sink in. "I've been patient. I've tolerated your arrogance, your disrespect, your attempts to make this my home instead of yours. But no more. This is my home. And that will not change. Not now, not ever." She slumped slightly, her composure crumbling. The smirk was gone, replaced by disbelief and anger. She opened her mouth again, but I shook my head, refusing to give her any more space. The silence was palpable. Finally, my son spoke quietly, as if admitting something he should have said long ago. "Mom, I didn't realize." I didn't interrupt him. He needed to see, to feel, to understand. She had almost taken him with her illusion of entitlement. Now he saw the truth laid bare. I looked at her one last time. "Learn this well. Respect is earned, not assumed. And this house, this home belongs to those who love it, care for it, and fought for it. And I have fought for it every day of my life." The room was heavy with quiet. My daughter-in-law's face was pale, her arrogance shattered. My son's eyes were full of regret, and the neighbors watched, astonished. I sat down slowly, feeling a calm wash over me. The fight was over. The truth had been revealed. And the house, my home, was safe. The days following the confrontation were quieter than I expected. The storm of arrogance and entitlement had passed, leaving a fragile calm in its wake. My daughter-in-law retreated into herself, no longer strutting through the halls as if she owned the place. She stayed in her room more, her attempts to redecorate or reorganize halted by the undeniable legal truth I had revealed. My son, however, was another story. For the first time in months, he looked me in the eye. There was guilt, yes, but also a dawning realization. He saw clearly how close he had come to letting someone manipulate him and take from me the home that had raised him. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, he finally spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I let us forget what really matters. I was wrong." I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of his remorse. "You were scared, John. I understand that. But it's important to remember that love isn't just about family ties. It's about respect, about standing for what's right even when it's hard." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I won't let that happen again. I promise." The house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief too. It was as if the walls themselves exhaled, shedding the tension that had filled every corner for months. I went room by room, straightening furniture, dusting off the shelves, reclaiming the spaces that had felt invaded. But this time it was different. It wasn't about asserting dominance or proving a point. It was about restoring harmony, reclaiming the warmth and love that had always been the heart of this home. My daughter-in-law tried to make small gestures, bringing flowers, offering to cook dinner, but they felt hollow. The arrogance had been stripped away, leaving only the realization that her assumptions had been wrong. I accepted the gestures politely, but I didn't let her regain control. Respect had to be earned, and hers had to be rebuilt from scratch. The neighbors, too, treated her differently now. There were no more whispers of admiration or sly nods toward her supposed plans. They saw her as she truly was. Someone who had overstepped and learned the hard way that entitlement doesn't replace years of care, love, and dedication. One afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen, baking a pie just like my husband used to enjoy. The scent of apples and cinnamon filled the house, and I realized how much peace this simple act brought me. My son wandered in, curious. "You know," he said, watching me work, "it feels right. The house feels like home again." I smiled, feeling the warmth spread through me. It's always been home. We just needed to remember what makes it so. Later, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, I reflected on everything that had happened. The confrontation, the tension, the fear of losing what I had built. It all felt like a distant storm now, weathered and behind me. I understood something crucial. Owning a home isn't just about deeds or legal papers. It's about care, consistency, and love. I had all of that, and in the end it had protected me. Even my daughter-in-law changed in small ways. Over time she became quieter, more reflective. She stopped making demands and instead observed, listened, and occasionally helped without overstepping. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. My son too became more attentive, more aware of the home he had nearly helped give away through inaction. Family gatherings returned to their natural rhythm. Laughter filled the rooms again. The children ran freely, the neighbors visited without tension, and I could finally enjoy the home I had fought so hard to protect. I realized that battles like these aren't just about ownership. They're about respect, boundaries, and knowing when to stand firm. One evening, as I closed the cedar chest where the legal documents were kept, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The house was mine, yes, but more importantly, the integrity of my family had been restored. The home was filled once more with love and warmth, not just walls and furniture. I poured myself a cup of tea, stepped onto the porch, and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The house glowed in the golden light, every window reflecting years of memories, struggles, and triumphs. It was more than a structure of wood and brick. It was a testament to resilience, patience, and the strength of a woman who refused to be erased. And as I sat there, feeling the gentle evening breeze, I smiled, knowing one truth above all. No one can claim what is truly yours if you are willing to stand for it. The house was mine, and so was the peace that came with it. Finally, after months of tension and fear, I could rest. The home was safe. The family was intact. And I, at last, could enjoy the fruits of a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. The battle was over, but the lesson remained. Strength, patience, and calm resolve often speak louder than anger. And in the end, the truth always finds its way. And in my house, my home, the truth had prevailed. The story ends with a satisfying closure. The mother not only protects her home but also restores family respect and order, leaving room for growth and reconciliation.